Joining us live now is Nationals leader David Littleproud. Good to see you again, Mr Littleproud. So do you think coalition MPs should be granted a conscious vote on the Indigenous Voice to Parliament? Andrew G has quit the coalition already over the Voice.
Yeah, which was a strange decision because it was made very clear to Andrew that we respected the fact that he had a different view to the rest of the party room. And the Nationals proudly has a culture whereby crossing the floor is something that is embraced, not always encouraged, but embraced. For him then to resign, I think, stems to more systemic issues that he may have with other parts of the National Party than the party room, the federal party room. What the Liberal Party does is up to them, but the rest of the National Party room federally got to a position where we don't believe that a representative body will shift the dial in closing the gap in rural and remote areas. We can see that uniquely, and I get there will be plenty of people in capital cities saying we just don't understand it. Well, we get to see it through a unique prism of living and working in these communities, and in the crisis circumstances, he's actually lived through many of the issues like domestic violence in these communities. And we've had a representative body before. This isn't another layer of bureaucracy we need to close the gap. What we need to do is make the bureaucracy work better. And that's simply about a minister taking control of the department and saying we don't need to send Indigenous people from remote areas to tell them what needs to happen in Canberra. We need Canberra bureaucrats to sit out around fires in these communities and have bespoke models of solutions to the challenges they face. But you're also going to send a very few from these communities into Canberra. And when you're talking hundreds of thousands of kilometres, so just might work in Redfern where it's 30 square kilometres, but you are talking hundreds of thousands of square kilometres with communities that have very diverse needs and challenges and opportunities. And to think that you can have one or two representatives come to represent all those people will mean that we won't get to close the gap quicker than what we should if we just make the bureaucracy work better. We'll simply be adding another layer of bureaucracy in.
Opposition leader Peter Dutton sent a letter to Anthony Albanese on Sunday demanding answers to 15 questions about The Voice. The PM labelled it a cheap culture war stunt. Is The Voice turning into a culture war?
No, I think Peter Dutton and his party want to get to a juncture where they want more information. We got to ours predicated on the fact that it was going to be another representative body that was simply going to be another layer of bureaucracy. Now, the Liberals may get to that juncture and they want more detail. I think it wasn't appropriate to have an in-depth discussion at a fundraiser for breast cancer. I think there are appropriate times for those conversations to take place around those details. So I don't think the opposition leader had any other form to ask those questions than in a written letter. So I think Peter Dutton's well within his rights. He's trying to get his party room to a consensus position in which the Prime Minister's asked us all to consider what they've put forward. Now, they want more information. We were able to predicate ours on it being a representative body that was just another layer of bureaucracy that we didn't believe would close the gap for us in regional areas. There is no malice in our decision, and there is no malice in the decision by the Liberals, whatever they may get to. We're simply looking at this through different sets of eyes from different perspectives from the people that we represent.
Just on another issue, David, a review of Australia's carbon credit market by former Chief Scientist Ian Chubb has been released, and it found the system was essentially sound but needs overhauling to increase transparency and to boost public confidence in the scheme. Would you support legislative changes to increase transparency in Australia's carbon credits scheme? And would this be enough to appease environmental groups, do you think, who seem to be against it?
Well, look, I think the review is important, and its findings that found that there is validity in what we've been doing because Australia has led the way, and in fact much of primary production, agriculture, farmers have been doing the heavy lifting, and this validates what they've been doing. We introduced the Biodiversity Stewardship Program, which goes a step further, and in fact Professor McIntosh was part of that in a very constructive way, and I respect him and I respect his actual views, and I think that the fact that there was a review into this to actually validate that things are working right, but we do need to look at that transparency. I think there is opportunity for us to look at that because there's opportunity where a lot of our top 200 companies are running off and buying an acre of the Amazon, yet we have programs that are set up here to support Australian farmers that they could pay that have greater validity and will actually go to not just abate carbon, but the one that the National Party created was also improve biodiversity, a world first. So I think there are opportunities that we look towards the legislation that can do that, that rewards farmers, because you know what? Our farmers have done the heavy lifting in meeting Kyoto and meeting Paris, and they had property rights taken away from them. So it's time for farmers to share in the rewards rather than take and have property rights eroded from them. So I think this is an opportunity, but I think the report and its findings validates the hard work that our farmers have been doing, but transparency is important because we should be competing against the rest of the world, and we do it better than anyone else in the world.
Just finally, and we are running out of time, but you're calling on the government to intervene in regional and remote mobile phone coverage. You want to reform the universal service guarantee to mobile phones to landlines and introduce mandated mobile roaming in 2023. We know remote and regional mobile towers probably are not that profitable for telcos, and therefore there's less focus on them to keep them working in a timely manner and improve their coverage. Is this the issue, and does what you are suggesting fix that?
Well, there needs two-pronged to this. One, we try to play nice. You, the Australian taxpayer, put in over 1,200 new mobile phone towers, and the telcos cherry-picked where they wanted them, where there was commercial opportunity. Now there isn't, and what they're doing is, because there is no regulatory burden, because the universal service guarantee put in place when Telstra was privatised, technology then was payphones and landlines. We've now got mobile phones, and so there should be a regulatory guide rail to make sure they do maintain them and repair them to ensure that the service is there. And then if you couple that with mandated roaming, which means that you can use whatever tower from whatever company, so if you pay a couple of dollars a month, you can do it anywhere else in the world. So if you're with Telstra and you go into Optus tower, you should be able to use an Optus tower. Just pay a small charge once a month and you'll be able to use that. That would increase our coverage, and particularly in remote areas where Telstra does have the majority, but then you have a sprinkling of TPG and Optus that are effectively stranded assets. If you have mandated roaming, you get better coverage. ACCC can actually implement this. They made a big mistake in not doing it in 2017. They did it from the comfort of their office in Sydney rather than putting a mobile phone in their hand and travelling through the bush and seeing how bad it was. But the government has the recommendations from the Rural Telecommunications Review handed down to them just before the election that they could implement, which would extend the USG, and we think it's now time for them, as the Nationals are prepared to work constructively with them to implement reforms of the USG and to make sure that ACCC mandates roaming for all Australians.
Well, it's important to many towns. David Littleproud, thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.